It is a true pleasure to introduce someone who certainly needs no introduction in this city, and I know how proud we all are to call him our governor. Born and raised here in Knoxville, most of us have known him for many years, and we know him as a true servant leader. Throughout his life, he's been deeply involved in serving others, as a business leader and ultimately president of Pilot Oil, but also as a community volunteer, where he worked tirelessly for many years on worthy projects throughout this area. As our mayor, he drove the successful redevelopment of downtown, led the creation of the South Knoxville Waterfront Development Plan, and kept Knoxville on a sound financial footing, more than doubling our city's financial reserves before he left office. Keep in mind, he was in office during the 2008-2009 meltdown, quite an achievement. He was also a uniter, healing the rift between city and county government to the benefit of everybody living in this region. Governor Haslam took the reins of leadership in Tennessee at a critical point in our state's history, and in the past 2 years, his vision, his leadership, and his integrity have made Tennessee a national case study in successful state government. Today, Tennessee has the lowest debt per capita in the nation. Under his leadership, Tennessee and also, at the same time, Tennessee has lowered the sales tax, reduced the hall income tax, and is in the process of eliminating the state's death tax. We've also got a budget surplus, and we've added money to the rainy day fund. However, one of his greatest achievements has been in statewide education reform, which is already producing positive results in student achievement and test scores throughout the state. You know, major reform is never easy, especially in government, but Bill's sincere and unassuming leadership style have earned broad bipartisan support and have avoided the divisive conflicts that we've seen in other states around the country. Very simply, he focuses on getting the job done in a constructive and civil way, and he doesn't care who gets the credit. What a contrast with what's happening in Washington right now. Perhaps Bill may have something to do about that someday. Let's give a warm welcome to the 49th Governor of the great state of Tennessee, the Honorable Bill Haslam.
Thanks, have a seat, thank you. Thanks, Wes, that was overly generous, thanks. First of all, it is always good to be home, and thanks so many of you for coming this morning. Mayor O'Hara and members of City Council and County Commission and a few members of our state legislature are here as well. Thank you, I very much appreciate that. I had somebody follow me around for 2 or 3 days recently, and they said, well, how do you keep all this from like going to your head? Every time you walk in, people stand up and you tell a joke and everybody laughs, and how do you keep that from, like, you start to think you really are something big? I said, well, every now and then I have some very, blunt reminders. 2 weeks ago, the Lady Vols were playing in Nashville against Vanderbilt. And those of you who've ever been to a game at Vanderbilt, the benches are behind the goals there in Memorial Gym, and then there's an empty row, and then there's a first row of seats. And I was sitting there with Pat Summitt, and we're watching the game, and I'm having a great time talking about the game with Coach Summitt. And but every time there's a break, groups of people walk up and kind of bend down in front of Pat and just say, hey, Pat, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done, what a difference you've made for the state. There's really nobody that can compare in Tennessee. And then they look at me and go, oh, and you too, Governor. Which wouldn't have been so bad, but back last fall I was home for a football game. I probably should have learned to avoid sporting events because these keep happening there, but I was home for a football game, and it's halftime, and I'm standing there, and some people come up talking, and a friend that I hadn't seen several years walked up, and he's since moved and lives out west, and we start talking, and he said something about, he said something about how are things going in Knoxville? I said, well, we're not here as much as we'd like to be, and we're in Nashville. I thought I'd get home more than I do. And he said, well, did you lose your job at Pilot? I said, no, I don't work there anymore. He goes, what are you doing now? And I said, well, actually, I'm the governor. And he goes, no way. That's a true story. A couple things. First of all, what I'd love to do this morning is to talk a very short period of time and then to really turn as much of this as we can into, I'll talk about whatever you'd like to, and we'll take questions. So if there's things that you'd like to ask, I'll do my best to get to those. I do want to, before I start talking about what we're doing, I want to talk about one thing that does tie into what we're doing in the state. People, now that I'm governor, everybody comes to you with all sorts of problems and not very many solutions. But everybody, would the state come do this? And so I have a whole different degree of appreciation for people who really are being effective in ways that help us. And one of our key priorities, like everybody else's, is economic development. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the chamber here and really everybody that's banded together in this entire region for Innovation Valley. When I became governor, we quickly divided the state up into 9 different regions because we figured out that the regional approach to economic development made sense. And we also figured out that capitalizing on the existing strengths that we had was a great strategy. Well, to be honest with you, I borrowed both of those ideas from Innovation Valley, the first version of it. And as you know, we're launching you all are launching Innovation Valley 2.0 now, and I would encourage you to be very supportive of and engaged in that effort because from my perspective, I see how effective it is, again, in building on the things that are known strengths here and then using the entire region instead of just worrying about what happens in Knoxville or Knox County. So that being said, let me give you a quick update of how things are going in the state. And Wes actually's introduction covered several of the things I was going to, so I'll make my talk even shorter. Right now, things are going well in the state. When we came into office, the challenge was not unlike the ones that face governments a lot of places. The recession was starting to bottom out, maybe come back a little bit. But a lot of our budgets had been infused with a lot of federal money. The state had about $2 billion a year in federal money that was going out, and so we had to make some adjustments to that. Now, fortunately for me, Governor Bredesen had laid out a good plan for how to do that. But we had to follow through on that and adjust it as time came to really learn to get by with less federal money than what we had before. And I personally think that's a message that's going to be true for all governments everywhere. I don't know how Washington's ultimately going to solve some of the deficit issues that we have and the debt issue, but I'm pretty confident it will mean less federal money going out a lot of different places and how that will impact us, whether it be at the national lab or at local governments or the state government. But that happened to us, so again, when we came into office, we were going to have about $2 billion less, so we had to make those adjustments. And what I may be the most proud of what entire state government did, legislature as well as administration, is, well, maybe some of the things we didn't do. What we didn't, as Wes just said, raise taxes. As a matter of fact, we've cut taxes on groceries last year from 5.5 to 5.25, and hopefully with legislature's help, we'll cut it from 5.25 to 5%. We've eliminated the gift tax, and we're in the process. By the way, we were one of only 2 states that had a gift tax, and we don't typically think of ourselves in that neighborhood. If there's only 1 or 2 states that have a tax, we typically don't want that to be Tennessee. And we eliminated the inheritance tax. And people say, well, why are you doing that? That seems like it only affects, a few wealthy people. Well, the truth is, wealthy people weren't affected. They just moved their residence to Florida or to some state that didn't have an inheritance tax. The people who are impacted are the people who couldn't. They had a small business that they couldn't move, or they had a family farm. And so what we're trying to do is encourage those family businesses to stay family businesses, and eliminating the inheritance tax did that. We also are slowly chipping away at the whole income tax, primarily for senior citizens who are middle income and lower, who are affected by that in the biggest way. We also didn't do it by raising our debt. We didn't take care of that by borrowing more money. The state has a AAA rating. You might say, well, what difference does that make? Well, I'll give you an example. Last week, the state of Illinois went out to borrow money, went out to basically sell bonds, and they had to pull back the offering at the last minute because they couldn't sell them. Well, you don't want to be in that position as a state, and it's why we've worked so hard to keep the debt low. That's one of those things, and like I said, I'm thrilled to have Mayor O'Hara here. One of the things you see in government is you don't start when you start your first day, you don't start at the starting line. You get the baton from somebody that came before you. And last night I was at deal at the University of Tennessee Baker Center with former Governors Sundquist and Bredesen. And as we were talking, we had a discussion on civility, which is an interesting thing for three politicians to do. But as we were talking, it occurred to me, you know, Tennessee, I'm thrilled that we have the lowest debt per capita of any state, but we'd like to take some, maybe we can take some credit, but the truth is that happened over years through a succession of governors and succession of general assemblies. And so we're very, very grateful for that, and we intend to keep it that way because it keeps our borrowing costs down and keeps it so that when we need to go to the market to borrow money, we can do that. The other key thing to do, and it's maybe what I want to talk the most about this morning, is when I looked around at other states and how did they solve this problem, the most common thing that people did was cut K-12 education. There are only 14 states out of the 50 that in the last 2 years haven't cut what they funded K through 12 education. Now, we haven't done that for several reasons. One, and it's the key message I think the Chamber here has been preaching for 10 years, is the direct link between education and business development. When I'm out recruiting folks, that's the one key thing I hear. Last month, we had some folks in here from Asia that were looking at putting a large manufacturing facility and a headquarters and a research function somewhere. And we had a great day and a great dinner, and as we're finishing dinner, the lead gentleman from the other side said, I need you to promise me one thing. I said, okay. He said, if we come here, you need to promise me that our children won't fall behind when they come to school here. So that's a pretty strong message, right? I mean, I can understand that. And so that's one reason we haven't cut. The second is historically, quite frankly, we've been behind the curve in funding K-12 education. I understand that it's not about throwing money at something. It is not when it comes to education. But you also can't be ignorant of the fact that when you're funding at a lower level, you're going to many times get lower results. And so, like I said, we not only have not cut, last year Tennessee had the second highest percentage of increased funding for any of the 50 states. And I don't know that we've ever been in that territory, and I'm pretty confident this year's budget funded, that was last year's, I'm pretty sure this year's budget funds education at a higher level than ever before. One of the extra things we did is put in this year, this is something everybody should know. Everybody's familiar with TCAP tests, which we do in Tennessee. We're going to move to a different testing system called PARC, and I think I see Dr. McIntyre. He can in here. He can tell me what the acronym stands for. What's PARC stand for? One more time. Partnership Readiness, thank you, for Partnership Readiness for College and Career. And one of the key pieces of that was it required a lot of the testing to be done online, which required a lot of technical capacity that the schools didn't have. So the state stepped up and said, we'll put $51 million extra into that to fund that for school districts across the state. We're serious about making certain that we move to the top in education. Like I said, we understand it's not just about throwing money at it, it's about different results. And this year in Tennessee, 55,000 more kids tested out as proficient in math than they did 2 years ago, and 38,000 more kids tested out as proficient in science than they did 2 years ago. We had double-digit graduation rate increase, one of only 2 states really to be in double digits increases there, and our TCAP scores showed the highest gains, highest aggregate gains in state history. So we really are on the right path, and efforts that are being made here in this area and really across the state, I think, are defining a new day when it comes to education. Again, it's an area that a lot of the initiatives happening, we didn't start. They were started before we got there, but we saw what was happening, jumped in, and we think there's incredible progress being made. We're also having a lot of focus now on higher education, for a very simple reason. I kept hearing from businesses, hey, you know, we love being here. Some of you have heard me say that. That was Volkswagen's direct quote to me. We love being in East Tennessee, and matter of fact, a couple of times they've said, I was down there again last week, and they said, we keep waiting for this fake nice to wear off. And then we finally figured out, well, maybe it's not fake nice. Maybe it really is, and this is a great place to be. And I was at dinner with 3 guys who had moved their families here from Germany, and they were talking about they hope they don't get transferred back or anywhere else, that they love being in East Tennessee. But they've also been very emphatic that we have to produce more graduates that they need. One of the reasons that we decided to invest heavier, and I know a lot of folks from UT are here, invest heavier in UT's engineering school. They are producing a lot of great graduates, and Chancellor Cheek and Dr. Davis from the engineering school came and said, if you'll give us more funding, we can produce more graduates. And so we've done that in this year's budget. We put an additional $3 million in. They're matching that money and more with money they're raising, with the whole idea of increasing capacity. One of the things we want to make sure we do in higher ed is that we're listening to what the market tells us they need. And when the market says we need more engineers, then we're going to go fund more capacity there. When the market tells us we need more welders, which it has told us that, we're going to fund more capacity. Our technology centers around the state are attracting graduates or folks who are looking to go into everything from nursing field to welding to a lot of the traditional trades. And those folks are graduating at about a 90% rate with a certificate, and they're getting job placements at about a 90% rate. And so we can get the connection. So we went and placed additional funding there, all around the idea of how do we put the people into the market that the market's asking us for. But even bigger than that is this. One of the biggest challenges facing Tennessee right now is that of the folks that are over the age of 25, only 32% have a 2-year degree or more. You say, well, okay, give me some perspective on that. Well, the perspective is this. Going forward, of the new jobs being created, about 55% will require a 2-year degree or more. So if only 32% of us have a degree, 55% of the new jobs are going to need it. You can see we're not exactly the type of fertile ground that a company is going to come look for when they're looking to expand and grow. And so we have to address that. So we have started what we call the Drive to 55. I have borrowed Randy Boyd from Knoxville. A lot of you all know Randy, who runs Radio Systems, the pet company here. And he has come to work for us. I told him his price range was just perfect. He's come to work for free. It worked perfectly into our scale. But really all focused along that idea of what do we do to move it so that we have 55% of our population have a 2-year degree. It's a huge challenge because, quite frankly, it's a capacity challenge of having enough spots and getting people through higher ed. It's also a funding issue. It's a cost issue for many families. And then it's a cultural issue. There's just far too many people in Tennessee who either don't think they can, either cost-wise or ability-wise, go on to post-secondary education, or should go on to post-secondary education. Now, everywhere I go and talk about this, people tell me, well, everybody doesn't need to go to college. I agree, everybody doesn't. But way more Tennesseans need to than have in the past. And so we're trying to address that on every side, from the cost and accessibility issue. One of my goals is eventually to have it that every middle-income child, middle-income and below child in Tennessee or student could go to at least 2 years of community college free of charge. And I think with some work we can get there. We're not there yet, but with some rejiggering of things, I think there's a way to do that. But again, having folks say, you know what, that really is possible, and nobody in my family's ever been to college before, but we can do this. We're also attacking one kind of left out segment in Tennessee. Right now there's 800,000 adult Tennesseans who have some college credit but not a degree of any kind. And we're working both with the Tennessee Board of Regents and the University of Tennessee system to say, how do we provide some reality for those folks? One of the different things we're doing is, we've proposed this year in this year's budget, is something called WGU Tennessee. It stands for Western Governors University. It's an online, accredited, competency-based degree program. So the idea would be, if you have some training in history, you're a 32-year-old single mother with two children, you have a few credits. You also, by the way, have worked in an accounting department for a business. What you've learned there can be put to work. So you'll be tested up to your competency level, then we'll come in with both online courses and a real-world mentor to hold your hand to provide you with the access to go get that degree. If you're a 32-year-old single mom with two children working a job, You might be saying, I'd love to get a degree, but when would I ever do it? When would I ever go to the classes? But if we make it to where you can do a lot of that online and also have a physical place to go get help, we think we can reach out to those 800,000 people who right now have some credit but don't have a degree. The last thing I want to talk about then is just kind of the state of the job market and the economy in Tennessee right now. In some ways things are a lot better. Unemployment's the lowest it's been in 4.5 years, and some of that is the national economy recovering. Some of that's Tennessee's recovering a little faster than other places. I'm pleased that last year we led the nation in manufacturing job growth, both in terms of pure number. Not the nation. Let me back that up. We led the Southeast in manufacturing job growth, both in percentage and in pure numbers. And I think that that's really the core of one of the things we'd like to obviously be great at is advanced manufacturing. So we are continuing to work hard to attract that. We're continuing to work hard to use the capacity that we have here. One of the things in the budget this year is to put some money in to work with Oak Ridge National Lab so that they hopefully we together can be granted the rights to the next supercomputer so we can continue to say that we have the world's fastest computing capabilities right here in East Tennessee. We're working with, like I said, the UT Engineering School to expand their capacity. It's all about trying to say what's the market telling us they need and making certain we meet that. I'm pleased with the progress we're making. We have, as I said, some of our team is here today. We've divided the state up into 9 different regions with very specific marketing strategies, and that is working. But I don't kid myself. It's a very, very difficult market out there. I'm going from here to Washington to the National Governors Association. It starts meeting this afternoon. And everywhere I go, we're competing not just for new companies, but to keep the ones we have. In the last 6 months, I'd say 4 or 5 of our leading companies have all come and said, oh, by the way, I've gotten a great offer from fill in the blank to move. And so it is a competitive, scrappy world out there right now, and we intend to compete very, very hard, and we feel good about that. I love where we are, both, like I said, in terms of the progress we're making on K-12 education and its connection, and in higher ed and making sure we're training the workforce. So with that, I will stop, and I'd love just to, till Mr. Edwards tells us we need to stop here in a little bit, I'd love to talk about whatever you'd like to, and I'll do my very best to answer it. If not, there's somebody in this room that probably can. Anybody want to be the first one? Okay, and Rhonda just said that we have microphones coming around, so. Mr. Della Volpe, I've called on you before.
Good to have you back, John. UT is just in the process of finishing the grounds of the Cherokee Farm sort of incubation of tying education to research and development. Is the state really excited about making another research triangle here? Because that looks like a great opportunity to get better professors, better students, more practical application of knowledge.
Yeah, great question. I was just talking with Wayne Davis and Jimmy Cheek. I don't know where Wayne and Jimmy went just 20 minutes ago about that very thing and some things we might do. So again, one of the strategies is it helps that UT has made that commitment, that investment in that physical property, because that's something we have not had enough of. And then we're trying to work with some of our existing folks to be the kind of core of that whatever you want to call it, of that capacity here. So I actually am very, very excited about that. Again, too often in the past, our issue in East Tennessee is even if we had somebody interested, we didn't have a place to take them where they had both physical land and access to the kind of resources that we have here at UTK and Oak Ridge around the corner. Mitch, yeah. Everybody's ready. If you're just ready to get back up to work, you can everybody kind of wink at me twice, and then I'll say, okay.
Governor, when you meet with CEOs or top business leaders that are thinking about relocating to this state, what are the top 3 things that you talk to them about to try to explain this is the place to be?
Yeah. Ultimately, what I sell here is a great quality of life. I'll tell you a story. There was a company that we were recruiting really hard, and they were actually in California. They were trying to decide if they were going to move to Tennessee or Texas. They ended up deciding on Tennessee, and I was this is after it was over, and we'd put together a pretty good incentive package. We had worked really hard about giving them the kind of training and infrastructure they'd need, and later on we went to dinner, and it was Chrissy and myself and the CEO and his wife, and so we're talking, and I said, well, in the end, what made you decide to come to Tennessee? And he goes, you want an honest answer? I go, yeah. And he goes, my wife wanted to live here. I'm like, well, we could have saved some money just buying you a house, you know. We could have had, I could have gone and got her, picked out a house, we'd have come out way ahead. But, you know, the point is, it really is about quality of life, and people do that. The second, I mean, it sounds like a broken record, but schools are such a huge issue, and I see that everywhere I go. And it's interesting because the school situation is different even as you move around, you know, from Knoxville to Nashville to Memphis to Chattanooga look very different even when we talk about our school systems. And as you go to the rural areas, you have a different picture as well. So I think that's it. The third thing, like I said, is really what I've said is businesses saying we have such a demand for trained workers. And that's why we're trying to do a better job of making that direct connection between what do you need and what are we giving you.
Morning, Governor. Question for you. What do you see as the top 3 biggest challenges for the state going forward? And then how do you see yourself best handling them?
Yeah, that's a really good, I always have a hard time with those most, least, top 3, whatever. I think this, I do think I always start with the budget because budget determines policy and priorities and everything else. And again, I saw where the city had recently had their mid-year budget retreat, trying to figure that out, and you come up with projections. We as a, I don't know exactly how, but we as a state are going to have less federal money. There are things that the feds had funded before that they're not already. They're not. I mean, remember after 9/11 and they sent Homeland Security money everywhere, and that money now is starting to end. And so we're left with the Homeland Security Department and funding that's going away. So I think we'll see a lot of challenges. There's programs like that, workforce development programs that have been federally funded. We're having to decide, do we pick that up and fund it, or do we just say, well, we were doing that because they funded it and now it's gone. So I think we'll see a lot of challenges like that, number one. And with that, everybody has heard about, obviously, the health care plan that Obama initiated and was passed a couple of years ago. There's a lot of discussion about whether states like Tennessee should expand to who we cover with Medicaid. Right now, the federal government pays for TennCare. Medicaid pays 2/3 of the cost, and we pay 1/3. The health care plan says expand to 138% of the poverty level, which is a decent number and more people, 300 to 400,000 more people in Tennessee, 300,000 more people in Tennessee. But we'll pay 100% of it initially, and then working down to 90% after that. But even regardless of whether we decide to expand or not, which is a decision we're in the middle of, there's a lot of additional costs that come with that to us. Another, couple $100 million a year, even if we don't decide to expand. So the budget pressures are going to be real and relentless. And I just think that's going to be true of all governments everywhere. So I'd say that's the first one. The second really would be making certain we have the trained workforce, and that's K-12 and it's post-secondary as well. And I just can't emphasize that enough because I just think that's the biggest challenge. The third thing is long-term, because it's tied to those first two, and you might be surprised when I say this, but it is actually the health of Tennesseans. When we look at all of our rankings, we're always 40-something. We actually moved up last year. We were 39th in kind of overall health factors. But when Mitch asked about what do businesses look at, that's one of the things people talk about as well, because businesses see healthcare costs as such a big part of what they do. It drives a ton of our budget is right now about 1/3 driven by healthcare costs, both TennCare, our own employees, and other programs. And so healthcare costs continue to go up double digit, and our revenue, and it's 1/3 of the budget, and our revenue only goes up 3 or 4% a year. Well, it's a math problem eventually. And so we need to do that for financial reasons, but also just to make Tennessee a healthier place.
Yes, sir. My name is David Brickhouse, and first I wanted to say I voted for you.
Thank you. Like really, or just now that it's over and I won?
No, it was way back.
Okay. Every now and then I'll meet somebody and say, "Hi, I didn't vote for you," but.
I wanted to actually kind of somewhat put you on the spot. I love the fact that you were just talking about health care. I'm the owner of Prodigal Primary Care and also Southeast Retained Medical, which is a company that is basically membership for health care so that people can actually afford health care. It's about $40 a month, but I'm getting a little nervous by seeing some bills coming forward about the, I guess I should say, the decrease in the rights for physician assistants like myself. I was prior military, and nurse practitioners trying to fill the void, of the primary care provider.
Right, and so there's, and I need to be careful I don't get over my head too quick with this discussion, but just let me maybe frame the issue as the health care, the Affordable Care Act, I guess is the legal name, takes place. Regardless of whether we expand or not, there's going to be a lot more people covered because a lot of people who are currently eligible for TennCare but not enrolled are going to find out through all this, the new exchange process, that they are eligible. So even if we don't expand, we're going to have 100,000 more people come on the rolls. And so one of the issues to a lot of people on Medicare is those are people who thankfully now are actually going to go to primary care. They're going to have a primary care provider that they might not have had before. And so the question becomes, do we have the capacity in the system to take care of that? And that's one of those questions. It all depends on where you're sitting. If you're a primary care physician, you're saying, we're good. If you're a physician's assistant, you're saying, if you would let us do more, then we can help take care of that. And the same thing goes with anesthesiologists and nurse anesthetists, et cetera. So I don't know that I can sit here today and delineate where that right line is. Is the increased need for capacity comes, how do we decide who can do what? I think that's, from my standpoint, it's a place we'll be inviting in a lot of medical professionals to see where we can help. There are several bills in the legislature right now dealing with that, and I can't remember exactly how many or which or where they are in the process.
Good morning.
Hey, Dwayne, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good. Speaking of education, what is your position on an elected superintendent, and what do you foresee might be happening?
Yeah, I'll be real clear on my position there. I am against elected superintendents, really for a couple reasons. I understand, believe me, we like to vote on things, but I'd say 2 or 3 reasons. I actually think an elected superintendent is more directly accountable than one who, an appointed superintendent than one who's elected. You all have a lot of city council here. If and there's some school board members too. If you don't like that superintendent, you can tell them tomorrow. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere else. If you're elected, you're there for a while, so that's number one. I think you're more directly accountable. Number 2, I know what it's like to be in an elected office and to have to go run and to spend your time doing that. And there's no question you're less effective because you're having to, you all know that, you have to go run and you're having to spend a certain amount of your time doing that. I think number 3, a superintendent has to make some really hard decisions that has long-term implications, and sometimes you end up with a lot of unhappy parents. That doesn't necessarily mean that he or she's not doing their job. They're just having to make hard calls, and I think that's where when you have a school board who is doing their job and stepping back and saying, are we making the right long-term decisions, that it can be the most effective. So there is a bill up this year. I don't know, there's been a bill, I guess almost every year for the last however many, somebody can probably tell me better than that, but I honestly think Tennessee would be better. If you look at one last thing, if you look at the high-performing school districts, and we can measure that. I know there's differences of opinions about how much testing should matter, but we can measure high-performing school districts. Almost everyone, like 98% of those high-performing school districts, have an appointed superintendent and not an elected one. Yes, sir.
Morning, Mr. Governor. You're like the other gentleman, I voted for you too. Anyway,
by the way, you don't have to say whether you did or not every time you stand up. That might hold back on some questions.
I want to speak in regards to the job reform that you put into place as a small business owner myself, and a service disabled veteran. And our company is a service disabled veteran-owned company, and we employ disabled veterans. We are a cheese manufacturer here in Seymour, and our company growth has went from nothing to over 3,000 stores in 30 states.
Wow.
At the grocery level in the dairy section. And we're proud to say that last year we placed Seymour, Tennessee on the map internationally as one of our cheese products took 6th place in the World Championship Cheese Competition.
Wow. Take that, Wisconsin.
Yes,
I like that.
Absolutely. So, but in regards to creating more jobs, our company has experienced a wonderful growth, but there's come a point where, to create more jobs, do more marketing, we have to have help. Is there any resources or any avenues that we can go to get help to grow our company? Because, with growth comes jobs, comes revenue, comes tax dollars. We want to support our community and support our state. And is there any kind of program implemented now or going to be implemented in the future to help growing small business?
So to respond, first of all, 3 things. Thank you for building that company here and hiring veterans and disabled veterans in particular. Secondly, I know some of our folks from our economic development team are in this room. I can't see him right now, but if you all just saw him and he stood up, if you would find him after this and tell him the specific programs that we have, because they all are, there's certain metrics and depending on what you're doing and how many people you're hiring, et cetera, that we can do with our programs to help like that. And without knowing more specifically, I can't say that. But that, and again, our local chamber is really good at working together with potential possibilities. So I will make certain that our team finds you if they haven't already. Thanks.
Good morning, Governor. Aaron Golfo with Team Health. You mentioned a moment ago state health exchanges, part of the Affordable Care Act, and if I could just ask a follow-up question to that. You recently made a decision to reject running the state health exchanges, essentially opting to allow the federal government to do that. I don't necessarily understand the implications of that decision. I don't know what that means, so I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit. And then the second part to that question is, should you choose not to, or should we choose not to expand the state Medicaid program through the ACA, does that change the arithmetic associated with the state health exchange?
Yeah, really good question. So, again, the Affordable Care Act passed, and there were really, governors and legislatures were left with 2 big decisions. Number one, the plan contemplates in every state, not contemplates, but demands, every state will have an exchange. Think of it as an online marketplace like Expedia.com or wherever that you go and compare. I can buy this insurance here, I can buy this, etc., and it's all laid out there. And so you had the exchange decision, and then you had expansion, which was, again, originally President Obama said we're going to expand to cover people up to 138% of poverty level. And then when the plan got challenged and taken to the Supreme Court, people saying, is the individual mandate forcing people to have insurance, is that legal? Supreme Court came back and said, yes, the plan is legal, but oh, by the way, you can't force states to expand to 138% because they're paying a part of that. And so then states were all left with the decision, do we expand to 138% or do we? So 2 decisions, exchange, run it ourselves or let the federal government run it, and expansion, expand to 138% or stay where we are. 2 really very separate issues that don't have a lot of consequences on each other, to be honest with you. The exchange, I actually started off thinking we should run it ourselves. I think we can run anything better than the federal government. I'm not saying that to brag on us. I think the city of Knoxville and Knox County can run things better than the state. Smaller, closer to home is better than bigger and further from home. And so I thought we can run it better ourselves. But as it came into play, and we had to make a decision, a month or 2 ago, I just never could get comfortable that HHS, that's who had the decision-making capacity in Washington, was ready for this. And it felt like if somebody's not, it's a huge interchange of data coming to us, and or going to them and find an income level and us to finding all sorts of data and back and forth, all the data that had to move back and forth, I wasn't confident that they were ready for that. And so it felt like if they're not ready, rather than have two of us in there in the kitchen, let's just have one. You all get it, you all cook it as well as you can. At some point in time down the road, if it makes sense for us to take it over, we will. But I just didn't have the confidence that they were ready to be in a partnership like that. So we decided to let them run the exchange for now. To be honest with you, the exchange decision is not, it got a lot of interest and a lot of people on both sides, you know, all fired up about it. I'm not sure in the end that it's that big of a difference one way or the other, just to be blunt about it. I haven't really said that all that much, but after I looked at it, I'm not sure it makes all that much difference. The expansion decision is very different because it involves a lot of money. Tennessee's costs are going to go up either way because of the Affordable Care Act, mainly because, like I said, a lot of people who are currently eligible but not enrolled. We also pay a $50 million tax as a managed care provider. There's several managed care providers in this room. You all get taxed now on certain things. We're going to get taxed on that as the state as a managed care provider, believe it or not, in the plan. So there's going to be some big costs to us. The cost to expand or not, we're actually doing the math on right now. The reasons, you might say, well, give me the pros and cons real quick, and I'll try to do this, and then I'll shut up here in a second. But the pros for covering is that you'd have more people for expanding, more people covered. And there's a lot of healthcare professionals in here. They would tell you if somebody has coverage, they're much more likely to get preventative care. They're much more likely to have a primary care physician who is taking care of them. And their health results are going to be better. Most people would say that, and logically that makes sense. We also, it would be very helpful to our hospitals. And some people don't, some people say, I'm not worried about our hospitals, but we have a lot of hospitals across the state that are in rural areas that are struggling. We have everything from big chain hospitals run by HCA to small rural hospitals to the local hospitals that you think of around here. They are losing, as part of the Affordable Care Plan, a lot of their what is called DSH payments. It's disproportionate share payments. It's payments for taking care of indigent people. And as part of the health care plan, they agreed to give that up because they said, the federal government said, you're going to get expanded. All these people who you cover, you're not going to need that extra payment for the indigent patients you're taking care of. So they agreed to give that up, and then the Supreme Court gave us the right whether to choose to expand or not. So that the hospitals got left in a big, in a tight box there, if you will. So we have to take into account their financial viability. And then the last thing is the financial impact on the state. And it's kind of easy to figure out at first because they're covering 100% of it. So we actually come out ahead in the first couple of years because there's a lot of things that we're covering now that we won't have to. That number works its way down to 90%. And so then it gets a little harder to make the financial decision. Finally, a lot of people would say, well, what happens when Washington eventually has to come close to balancing the budget? This costs a lot of money. They can't keep paying all this, and they're going to cut back. What happens then? And that's the question a lot of folks have. So we're trying to decide financial impact on the state, what's it do to our health care providers, and what's it do to the health of our citizens, and then what sort of circuit breakers could you put in there to, if the feds do change the rules, that we don't get caught. So way more answer than you maybe wanted, and I apologize, but it's a hard decision. So maybe one more question, and is that good? Or no more questions? You want us to go home? All right, good. Yes?
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Copper with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of East Tennessee. And as you know, last year UT released a study that Tennessee has the third fastest growing Hispanic population in the country. So I just wondered how we can best help these people to assimilate in education, job growth, and also business growth.
Well, my first answer would be through organizations like yours. And we're doing that in East Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee, trying to help increase the employment capacity and the employment opportunities there. I think the second, I keep coming back to it, I sound like a broken record about education, but I just honestly believe having the best education systems, and again, Dr. McIntyre and others can tell you this, there was a debate forever about some people who said you can't solve education issues until you solve poverty. But I actually think it's the reverse. I don't think we're going to solve poverty issues in this country until we solve education issues. it's why we put so much focus. So I really have organizations like yours are incredibly important. People come to us thinking, here the state can do this. We can do some things, but we can do a whole lot more if there's people on the ground. And like I said, I'm obviously familiar with you folks, with your group from being mayor here, and we're doing some things in Middle Tennessee and Memphis as well. So those are the two things that I would keep coming back to. So thank you all. Y'all have been incredibly patient. It's always great to have a reason to be home and ask me back, so I'll have another reason. Thanks.
Governor, thank you so much for your time this morning and the great comments you made and the answers to the questions, really good questions. Thanks so much to all of you for your time and interest in being here. Big thank you to Stowers Machinery Corporation for the sponsorship of this. Alcoa Incorporated, thank you for your sponsorship and your presence in the community. Both companies are truly pillars in the foundation of economic development here in Knoxville and the Innovation Valley. Hope all of you have a great day and a great weekend, and thanks for your attendance.